All right, here we are. Welcome to JNUC 2024. They told me to open with a joke, so I don't really like doing jokes except on elevators because it works on so many levels. Yes. So welcome to the Jamf Setup and Reset ChildLife Distraction Device presentation from Scott and Eric from NIMORS. And there is going to be a Q&A at the end, and I will have a microphone in the middle of the aisle so we can record for everyone to hear what's going on in the Q&A session. Over to you.
Showing up. Here we go. Little echo. Okay. Thank you all for coming. I'm Eric Lansall, Scott Shaw. I've been at NIMORS 3 years, almost 4, and this project came into, almost 6 months after I got there. Scott and I met, and we got piled together for this project. And
yeah, so I'm Scott. There we go. And I have the best job in the world. I was hired as a game and technology specialist within ChildLife to play video games and set up video games and do iPad lending for patients in the hospital. So we have some long-term kiddos, and I get to interact with those folks on a regular basis. And like I said, I love what I do, and part of what I do is working with Eric with these iPads, and our team has several iPads, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But Eric, tell us what Jamf Setup and Reset is.
Okay, so we're just going to go with a simple overview. If you don't know what Jamf Setup and Reset is, we're going to allow a single iPad to have multiple uses. So you can have one iPad, run it through this whole processor in Jamf, use the Jamf Setup app to choose what kind of profile you want, and the Reset app wipes it all clean. So that's just kind of a real brief overview, but we kind of need to go back for a moment in our Wayback Machine as Scott and I first met, and have a little story time. Scott, what was it like as you showed up first day?
So the first day that I showed up, my manager showed me a large stack of iPads that were still wrapped up and said, we need to have these deployed out to our staff. And we have some. We have probably about 30 to 50, we don't really know. They're all managed under different Apple accounts that we made up. They all share some of those accounts. Some folks have lost their iPads. There was a lot going on that I was like, okay, what did I just get into? So a lot of the staff may be a little bit more tech savvy or less tech savvy, depending on who they are and how they got to our department. And so some of them were more comfortable with more of the technical stuff, and some are definitely not. And so we needed a way to kind of manage all of those, and that's when I said to Eric, hello, Eric. I have this big mess. How can we solve it?
So our previous iPad.
Yeah, there's multiple issues, like I said. So no one central place or person to manage all of these iPads. There wasn't a way to manage the iPad for each patient. So there was just a generic user account based kind of style. And so if you want to go to the next one there. And then families would log in with some of their account information, which if you work in healthcare, you know that's a no-no if you're going to share that device anywhere else. And so we needed a way to remove all of that information. They were also tied to multiple devices were tied to a single Apple ID. So if a family took a picture on that account and then somebody else was using a device that was also tied to that account, huge big no-no. So that was kind of tricky to get solved in all of this. And then the deployment may or may not have been approved by management and our IT services of what our staff was doing in terms of iPads and how they were being utilized. And so we also had to take care of security updates, and so there wasn't really a smart or effective way to do that. And so we wanted to solve all those things. And as you can tell, anybody experience a little bit of that ever walking into that? I hope not. Sorry. Again, sorry, but hopefully this will help provide a reliable method towards solution.
It was a mess. You get the idea. All these iPads, no problem. So I did what any good IT guy does. I Googled it. You know, what's the best way to manage the iPads? Thank you. I'm glad that hit. And what I came up with was something back in 2019. Adam Derrick was presenting this Jamf setup and reset. And I said, oh, this is perfect. I think this is going to work for us. So after watching that, coming up with the plan, I knew I could come up with, oh my gosh, okay, here are the system improvements that this is going to have. I've got one central place to do all this. Whatever iPad I put in this group, it's going to be consistent across the whole system. We're able to have rules. Big thing is our legal team got in there. They're like, we don't want a camera. We don't want them to have access to certain web pages. They really wanted to limit some of the kids' experience so that it was exactly finite, just a small little section to keep them entertained. The iPads can now be customized for each different age group. Families can now use their own account sign-ins in Netflix because after each use case, it gets wiped and erased. So little chance to no chance of that going on to the next person, because you'd really hate for somebody to get into your Netflix account and upset the algorithm, right? So ChildLife now serves a wide range of patients and complexity. So this is our setup. The first column is ours. We have it set for preschool, school age, teen, ChildLife facilitator, which is a caregiver in the room that would do some items, and another facility for outpatient. Business might be for a sales reps, inventory control. You've got education for different degrees of education. So, Scott, as we got to all those, Scott had to start getting the team going. So,
yeah, and so our ChildLife team had a tech committee, which was made up of the folks who weren't afraid to touch the iPads. And then when I came on board, I was added to that committee so we could help. And we did a lot of things early on. We wanted to find out all of the apps that were going into those age profiles. So they did a lot of that homework on themselves. So which apps get assigned to which profiles, and what kind of permissions do we want to have for each one of those age groups. We also met with Eric on a regular basis, which was phenomenal, and we actually had Eric come up from Florida to Wilmington, Delaware to experience all of the things that ChildLife was dealing with when we're lending these iPads out. And so what Eric saw was like every single unit, from oncology to clinic to dialysis to all of our limited room of physical space, along with our patient rooms, what does it look like? What physicalities are you putting this iPad into? Because we were using the iPad in place of maybe a game system, because I can't roll a game card in there, but I can get an iPad into the room without infringing anything or what doctors and nurses needed to do while the patient was in. So he got to see firsthand how some of these profiles were being rolled out, what age groups they were assigned to, and how our staff was interacting with the iPads and with the patients. Because a lot of times with these lending iPads, it stays behind in the room. And so if the kid is left by themselves with an iPad, we wanted to make sure that those things were appropriate and sufficiently locked down. So we continue to have these meetings on a regular basis so that, as you'll see later, if there are apps that are coming out that we want to add into it, there's a way and a mechanism for us to do that. And working with Eric and his team on a regular basis, just make sure that all of those things are happening the way that they should. So, and I kind of talked about some of these things before. So we had a tech committee. So having those tech committee meetings really helped us prepare our side of things so that Eric could go, oh, okay, I know what to do, and build those things out. And then we wanted to define what that work process looked for our team. Like, where do you find these iPads? How do I get those iPads out? What do I do in order to sign an iPad out? And what do I need to tell the system of where this iPad will live, and also give me a way to find those iPads after they forget where they took them. We have this thing called reliable methods. If you've worked in healthcare, how do we do this over and over and over and over and over again without losing kind of the main purpose and effectiveness of what we're trying to implement? So we developed those reliable methods so that we could share that with our outpatient nurse managers or our hematology nurse managers, so that they understood what our process was. And then training for our staff inside ChildLife, as well as some fringe folks that kind of get influenced by what we do. So we did that's a reliable method, and then we could share that and train the staff on those items. And then we presented at staff meetings just to make sure all of our folks were prepared and knew what they were going to do with the iPads and how to do it at that staff meeting. And then individual team members who may have left or come in, and we need to retrain those folks, or if they missed that particular meeting, we would have all of these materials ready to share with them so they understood what the process was on the front end of things. So with that,
Yeah, and just to explain, the reason why we're going through all these steps is I really needed to understand his world. He needed to kind of have an idea of what these pads look like, so he got an early release and did a lot of this training with staff. So although it wasn't fit and finished, we knew how some of this reset and restart was going to work. We could kind of show the apps and more of the presentation of.
and again, he's in Florida and I'm in Delaware.
Right. So I did a couple of assumptions here, and I'm just going to walk you through these next steps of getting Jamf set up, kind of set up on a minimal scale, okay? So I've got a couple of givens here that I call it. So as we prepare, we need to have these iPads in an MDM or some sort of management so we can set up a group and point it to a pre-stage enrollment. So with that, in a pre-stage enrollment, I wanted to mention this. I think most of you know in a pre-stage enrollment on the iOS side, it can give you the ability to assign a name to it. As Scott mentioned, he's in Delaware. I'm in Florida. We are also going to roll these out to Orlando, Pensacola, Jacksonville. So knowing which iPads are in which location was very helpful as we went down the line. All right, and one more here. I've got these up here as the QR codes and the tiny URLs for Jamf's documentation on how to set up Jamf setup and reset. I wanted to make this easy for everybody, so I know you guys can all get this later. All right, so our next steps, what do we do first? We've got to set up an extension attribute. The extension attribute is in settings inside of Jamf, so we got to get that set up so we can find these. We need to build a smart device group for each one of these profiles, whether it's business or for us, school age. At this time, you're probably going to want to talk about what kind of restrictions are you going to put on the iPads. You're going to allow everything, you're going to allow nothing. So having a game plan to begin with. We need to go out and get the apps set up and reset from the Jamf store so we can get those loaded on the iPad. And here we go. Okay, so this is our role and our extension attributes. Anybody set up an extension attribute before? It's really not too hard. Don't get intimidated by this. It's right there. It was just this simple. Role, it's in text, that's it. Okay? The power is in the app side. So this is the Jamf setup app. And if you notice there, did anybody use the app configurations? Until this time, I barely used app configurations. So having all this text in there was a little daunting. So this next slide shows just the few lines of code that we need to change. The red is what they give you by default. You put in your profiles. Mine are my age groups for these iPads. If yours are sales, inventory, and whatever, do those accordingly. All right, so far so good. Now we got to go in and set the reset app. It's a little simpler. Same sort of thing, app configuration. Code, yeah, I know the code. As I highlighted here, the one thing I wanted to call out that I thought was real interesting, the reset. There is the ability in Jamf's documentation to do a soft reset. So if you're testing this, having that soft reset easier to go over and over again until you get it out of your testing mode and in development. So that would be found there in that reset. All right, so here's our smart group. This one is the outpatient. All we're keying on is the word outpatient that we set up in the app. We have the ability in that same smart group to do the background. Hey, remember lions, tigers, and branding, oh my? That was last year's. Here's our branding for all of our age groups. All right, so we're on our outpatient. We got our outpatient set up. Okay, so now it's time to start looking at some of these smart groups, right? Let's see what's. Here's the setup app. All you got to do is pick the age group for us. Once the age group goes off, it goes right into that profile, whether you set the background screen, the apps in those smart groups, Everything kicks off right away. Some of our backgrounds and setups, just so you can see. And things I wanted to show here is we change the background every time it's in one of those age groups. And also notice that it's only preloading a few of the apps. We found this out through experience, that it's best to only set a couple of those apps available for the kids, because if you tried to preload all 10 apps, 20 apps that you wanted to do, yeah, the deployment's going to take a long time. The App Store's there, they figure it out in no time. That, or somebody on the staff says, hey, you need a few more apps, just go to the App Store there. They'll get just the apps they need.
And one of the things that we also noticed is that our prep books, so our staff use a lot of kind of explanations of what the kiddos are going through while they're there. And we found that some of those prep books were kind of large. And so we took a look at what prep books do we use all of the time that we need on every single deployment or visit with patients. So we made sure that those prep books were the ones that got loaded and not everything that was in our catalog.
And that's just an EPUB or a PDF that we put in there as our book. It's nice to have because right now staff were just taking their own iPads in there. Hey, this is what's going to happen. This is the things they're going to do. Now we can make sure that ebook is loaded on their device that's with them in the room, and they can go back and look at it. Maybe they missed one of the pages. Maybe they missed what was going to happen. So it was a great thing to leave on that device to show folks. All right, so we've made all of our screens here, and now, Scott, why do we rely on this?
So we really rely on this because we have about 20 staff members that cover all kinds of units all over the entire hospital. So they need to be able to grab one of these devices, any of them, put it into the appropriate profile, have the tools and resources they need for the patients, for themselves, and be able to do that in a very short amount of time, because sometimes we get called into situations to help ease kids' fears or anxiety about certain treatments. So we really rely on Jamf in this setup and reset process. So when we get that iPad back from whatever that deployment is, whether it's to a room or to a clinic or with a facilitator, we can reset that iPad back, and that's how it gets stored in our closet. And so once it's reset, they can go in and make sure that whatever, let's say they're going to go visit a 3-year-old who has a new diagnosis, all of the previous stuff gets wiped in that reset, and so all of it can just come right back in as what Eric was describing.
The grab school age.
Yeah.
Preschool.
Yep, preschool. Yep.
And as they're walking to the room, this is
just loading those apps and those prep books behind the scenes. So we get a lot more usage of our iPad fleet because we're able to use it for every single case that our team needs. So with that minimal time needed to get a device to a working state has been tremendous. And again, we use this probably like 30 or 40 times a day sometimes, depending on how busy we are as a hospital and how busy our staff are. Because they'll get called in if some kid needs an IV and they've never had an IV before. There's resources that we want that ChildLife facilitator to have in order to explain what's happening to that particular patient. Also, those prep books that we talked about, it's not a grand size of materials, but it does slow things down.
Part of that great repeatable process.
Yeah, and so we really worked with our staff on my side and say, okay, which are the top 10 books that you really absolutely must have every single time? And they're like, well, for all the profiles or just one or two? And so we can have those conversations and make sure that those books are a resource. And like Eric was saying, with that iPad staying with that patient, they have those books that they can refer to back. They're like, oh, I don't remember why I'm feeling like this. And let me go see if that resource is there that I can review and take a look at. The specialty apps. So we had a few instances where a parent would say, this is what they're using at home or at school. We don't have that device here. Could we get that particular app now on this device? And so we've provided a mechanism to do that, which is the app suggestion form, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then this all streamlined for our staff, specifically in pre-op and surgery and the emergency department, because a lot of times it's a quick turnover, and in pre-op they'll give the patient the iPad to kind of occupy time before they go into their procedure or whatever else that they're going to have. So having those really quick, specific load times helped our staff tremendously.
So what we got left is our power of profiles. I'm just going to go through these pretty quick. It streamlines our workflow. The device security is now taken care of. Security signed off on this because they were happy. They see the iPad goes out, it gets wiped, it's clean. It's digitally clean. In a hospital, you've got to have that. No patient information has got to leave that room. Reissuing. IT now no longer really needs to touch these iPads. Staff are hitting that reset button, and it gets reset.
So having this response time, we have what's called a BERT, or a Behavioral Emergency Response Team. So a patient may be getting agitated and escalating their behavior. They may have several complexities of whatever is going on with their health. And a lot of times these things get called because a patient's just unhappy, and that's where our ChildLife team really comes in and says, all right, what can we do to de-escalate this? And we had a situation where they were doing some things on YouTube that they weren't supposed to, and so the nurses had taken away that iPad, which escalated the patient a little bit, and so we were called in, had the iPad, I got on Teams with Eric, and I was like, hey, can we just remove YouTube from this particular device? We gave him the serial number, he took it off, we were able to put it back in.
Right back out, so that made it real easy to get that.
Yeah, and so we were able to give that patient back the iPad, which then de-escalated them, and we didn't have to have what's called a BERT. So that was really, really helpful. We are also able to take into account other circumstances. We may have babies that just need to listen to music to keep them calm. Kids like to listen to their particular sounds, or show opens. We had one guy that just wanted to watch the opening Paramount logo over and over and over again. And so some of these use cases, Bluetooth was able to be pushed out on a specific smart group, was it, or a static group? So that we could have Bluetooth capability on this one particular device.
Just the one device, not the whole fleet.
Not the whole fleet. And so those specialized profiles really start to open up when you talk about our ChildLife facilitator. So our ChildLife facilitator, they're going to sit with that patient while they're going through whatever it is, and they're not leaving that particular iPad by the patient's side. And this is useful for, unfortunately, we have to do heartbeat recordings from time to time, and having an app that connects Bluetooth-wise to a stethoscope that records heartbeat, we can deploy that really easily through the ChildLife facilitator profile. So that also allows us to do things like FaceTime when parents aren't able to be by the bedside with a patient, and they want to check in, and they want to do FaceTime. This ChildLife facilitator, we can turn it on, we can give access to the camera, we can let them say goodnight to their kiddos, which, you know, if you're a parent, this is extremely important to you. So those types of things really allow us to craft not only our profiles and our usage, but gives our staff that level of comfort too, that they're able to do the things they want to do without calling IT.
So just to reiterate, our known solutions are, we got one central place for this all to work inside of Jamf setup and reset. We got profiles for all different age groups. Test, test. There it is. There it is. Okay. So we got our profiles done, and age groups. Account information being wiped. We got that sanitized, that iPad sanitized again and again. And Jamf's granularity gives us the ability to do some of those special features, like turning on Bluetooth for a device, turning off Bluetooth, adding a camera for the moment. So now, all of this has come with some givens. Like I said, we don't need to rely on IT. We got staff to do the reset. But we want to kind of flip this conversation. Thank you for being here. We're not quite done, but we're going to flip this conversation just a little bit and open it up. Have you guys done Jamf setup and reset? If you have, have you guys come across anything for scheduling a reset? We're going to flip this around. We've taught you a few things. Maybe you can teach us a few.
Yeah, and what we're looking for in that reset is in our emergency department, like they may have several kiddos coming through. And if they sign into an account, that staff person probably in a hurry may or may not reset that device. So we want a way to say every 3 hours, we want to reset back to the outpatient or emergency room department profile that then wipes and sanitizes that information off, but it gives a prompt that says, hey, are you still using this? Yes or no. If you don't get any input, reset it and kick it back out, wipe the device, put it back into emergency room or outpatient.
And the other one was an instant Bluetooth, just in case anybody knew. A self-help request. Somebody needs a cable, somebody needs something in the device. Is there any way to get that information to a staff member quickly? And the last one we have, we just actually figured this one out of a hidden self-service. If you don't know, self-service, if you've got it in there, a Jamf self-service, you can do a sign-in on that self-service so that you can then hide some apps behind the scenes. That self-service person's, or that person signing in their user account can show those hidden apps that you need. Maybe just to deploy in that instance. Maybe we can take care of some of these with that kind of method. But we wanted to have this kind of conversation with the group in case somebody knew, because we're only 2 years into this. I mean, it's pretty new for us. And then the next part for us is our next system improvements. So we're going to Jamf's healthcare listener. That's our next thing. I know, I'm scared. Okay, well then, great. That's good to hear. So yes, our next deployment will be in Orlando with Jamf Healthcare Listener. Once that comes online, yes, it'll be fleet-wide for all of that. We're also going to be adding a large number of those iPads in Orlando, so through a grant process. We hope to start moving into getting more apps into our app catalog. It was enough, as Scott talked about at the beginning of this, for staff to realize we only paid $5 once and we had this app on 10 different iPads. Well, that kind of changes as you go into this situation, because now you've got to pay $5 for every iPad you deploy that app onto. So that's a little difficult pill to swallow when people paid a lot of money for some of the apps that they have on those previous iPads. And that does not carry over. We tried to recoup that, saying, hey, this is the Apple ID that was used. Can we move it over to our system? Apple said, no, thanks. We'd really appreciate you buying 9 more copies of it. And
yeah, we had a larger acceptance from our staff, our caretakers, our patients. They're now expecting this. If we have repeat frequent flyers, they come in, they're like, can I have an iPad? And they're excited and they look forward to those things.
Yeah, that's a great thing to have. And the last thing we're hoping to add soon is Apple TVs. Just something that we haven't thrown in there yet, but looking forward to managing that. So the last slide we've got is talking about our side apps. Just so you knew, a couple of side apps we use. Scott, you lean on these heavy.
Yes, so I didn't have a way of doing a sign-in, sign-out process when I walked into the door with all of these iPads. So I did some research. I found OrcaScan, which is a phenomenal product. I'm not endorsed by either of these companies, but OrcaScan lets me scan barcodes, create QR codes, label everything, have my own, like, what do I want to know from somebody who's checking out this device? And I was able to say, okay, what room and what unit are they deployed to, and which one of my staff signed it out, so I can run a report and say, hey, Molly, you have X amount of devices on your unit. Can you please bring those back because they're not being reset? So that was a very useful, helpful find. It also generates all your QR codes for you that are specific to OrcaScan. You can run it on an iOS device. It has an app for that. There's all kinds of APIs if you want to integrate it into other things, and it will export a nice handy-dandy Excel spreadsheet if you're into that. And then JotForm. I've been using JotForm for just about everything form-based that does not include PHI or protected health information, so that I can collect those app suggestions. It goes through that process, and it's on the iPad itself, so my staff goes, oh, hey, this parent wanted this app. I'm going to put in the, it's for Molly. It's on, the preschool or teen or all of the profiles that I wanted. Here's the link to it, and then Eric and I both get a notification of that. So JotForm's really swift, quick, easy fix for that too.
So that really concludes what we have as a presentation. I hope this explained a little bit of how you could get a setup and reset started in your shop or your area. We'd love to talk to anybody who's got questions. We'll be available after this. Otherwise, you can look at the first slide, and I am eric.lansall@nemours.org.
And I am scott.shaw@nemours.org.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from the group?
Yeah, let's hear it for and then if anybody has questions, I'm happy to run the microphone to you so we can capture those questions.
We've kind of done something like this at Iowa, but I guess my question is, how do you? I'm trying to figure out how to protect them from switching profiles, like just going in the setup, choosing a different profile, and because you want that app to be there, but you also don't want kids to do it by messing around and going.
Are you talking the setup app? You don't want them to switch profiles?
Yeah.
Oh, as I get into each profile, I hide the app.
Okay.
Yeah,
So then if they want to change it, they have to do the
They have
reset, and then it just comes up.
Yep.
But if a kid did the reset, it would come up, and they could select a new profile. That's what I'm trying to.
Oh, okay. So you want to lock them in. So
because the kids mess
that's
around.
a better
We
one.
found our kids would mess around. They reset it, and then they go into setup. So
and ask for a higher profile
what
or
I
something.
would really like is if setup could somehow have like a pin you could code in app config that would require the pin to actually go in there. Because the only people that should be resetting devices would be the ChildLife people that we have.
Some of the, and maybe I'll chime in,
Go ahead.
some of the messaging that we have on the reset are like, are you sure you really want to erase all of this? And we haven't had too many folks and kiddos go through and reset because they've made progress in a game that they don't want to lose. So it may be different in an educational setting.
Yeah.
However, like we've had a patient reset it and put it in Japanese, which happens from time to time. So I think maybe with some of the additions of blueprints and things like that, you can add those
Yeah, I'm thinking that could help.
passcodes.
Return to service. Adam Derrick and his return to service could definitely get it back into certain age groups. Another thought, would probably be that healthcare listener. I mean, I know it's titled healthcare listener, but maybe you can use it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing that is available in the setup app, I think, is that you can tie it to an IDP login, at least with Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
Supports several others,
Yep.
so a staff member would be able to log in and pick that profile. But obviously, that sort of makes it a lot harder to use because they have to type in their credentials every time that they're going to pick that profile.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hey, thanks for that presentation today. It was great. We also work in healthcare, not children's healthcare, but we do care for children when they do come in. Yeah. And so we have implemented Healthcare Listener and Return to Service, but we don't really use Return to Service so much anymore now that we have the Healthcare Listener implemented. Is that also kind of what you guys are foreseeing for your future, or are you going to be a mix of both?
Well, we're really.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had that backwards. I'm sorry. I'm nervous.
Yes.
So we are using Return to Service with the healthcare listener, just to clarify.
Okay. Well, I don't know where we're headed with healthcare listeners, so that's coming for us. I've heard of Cincinnati Children's and Walter Dobbins, his use case.
He left.
He left.
Just FYI, you have to get mad at him. He left.
He said he was going to be here.
So I think our thought at UCSF is to leave both of them. So like healthcare listener, yes, is your primary, but also leave
Service.
leave the reset in there for a couple of reasons. Like if it fails, right? Like yes, ADT has issues at 2 o'clock in the morning. You want to come in for it. Also giving the family the ability to, like you're in your hotel room and you're like, oh yeah, it's gonna light my Netflix when I leave. Like really, I kind of want to do it myself. So we can give the families the ability to do that. And then I think we will have some devices that healthcare listeners is critical for, to do that association to a patient or a room each time. So I think there's probably room for both with, using healthcare listener as a primary.
Thank you.
I'm Justin Fincher, I'm from Children's of Alabama. So one of the things that we're actually testing out now is we just had implemented mobile assist. Well, when I say implemented, we just developed it and in the testing phase right now.
Oh.
But I think that that is actually a really good use case. As you were talking through this, I'm like, why couldn't I deploy, mobile assist to our ChildLife?
Yep.
They scan it, they can set it up, they can reset it, they can clear a passcode, they can do any of that. So, I mean, there's even another option. And we're, of course, doing return to service as well.
So let me ask the question back. Did you set up a Java box and do your own background?
All the above.
Yeah, and we have the background user personalized per device.
Yeah.
Which we've been doing that for a long time. It's been super helpful.
Yeah, you just create multiple webhooks that
Yep.
point to a different background depending on the smart group that they're in.
And if you guys don't understand what they're talking about, I showed you that one screen that you saw outpatient, teen, and all that. That's the home screen. We do a different lock screen at Nemours just to say, hey, this is Nemours property. Return this to a nurse or return this to staff at the end of the day. We leave that lock screen there. So a kid really doesn't, well, we hope they don't think too much about having it walk out. We haven't lost but one.
No, we got that one back.
We got that one back. Okay. We haven't lost any. We were worried about that because, shiny new device, right? You think these things are going to walk. What? I think the branding and that message has come through. So. Oh, it was good. Eaten. Okay. You never know. Anybody else? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope this gave you a couple takeaways. Hope you guys enjoyed the rest of JNUC.
All right, thanks again, Scott and Eric.
Thank you.